There is a moment in every man's life, a moment he never forgets. Not when she ignores him, not when she pulls away, but when he finally stops speaking, because the silence of a man hits harder than any words he could have said. You've felt it, haven't you? The exhaustion of trying, the weight of explaining, the frustration of giving your presence to someone who stopped valuing it a long time ago. You tried clarity. You tried effort. You tried being the good man. Nothing worked. But the day you stopped, the day your phone went quiet, the day you pulled your energy back into your own world, something strange happened. She noticed. Silence isn't empty. Silence is pressure. Silence is contrast. Silence is the moment she finally feels what life is like, without your presence holding her emotional world together. Women don't miss the man who is always there. They miss the man whose absence changes the atmosphere. This video will show you why your silence hits her harder than any message you could ever send. Why she starts thinking about you more when you stop saying anything at all. And why the quiet strength you step into becomes the one thing she can't ignore. Stay with me, because from this point forward, you'll never see silence the same way again. Most men think silence is just silence, a pause, a gap, a moment where nothing is happening. But to a woman, your silence is not an empty space. It is a psychological earthquake. Silence is the moment when everything she thought she understood about you suddenly shifts. It's subtle at first, almost invisible, but its impact cuts deeper than any argument or emotional confession could, because silence doesn't speak to her. Silence speaks inside her, and that internal voice is always louder than yours. 1. Silence breaks the emotional pattern she relied on. Women operate on emotional rhythm. They won't always admit it, but they become accustomed to the energy you give. Your messages, your effort, your attention, your tone, your reassurance. Even if she acted indifferent, even if she played it cool, even if she convinced herself you cared more than she did, your presence became a predictable part of her emotional world. Predictable, comfortable, certain. And certainty kills curiosity. When you suddenly fall silent, the pattern breaks. Her emotional nervous system senses it instantly, long before her mind can rationalize it. The drop in your presence creates a void, and that void becomes a psychological trigger. She no longer knows what to expect from you. She no longer knows what you're thinking. She no longer knows where she stands. For the first time, she loses control of the emotional rhythm, and losing control is what activates her deepest feelings. 2. Silence removes the emotional safety net she took for granted. No matter how confident she seems, every woman relies on subtle emotional safety nets. Your replies, your effort, your predictability, your interest. These things gave her quiet reassurance. Not reassurance as in love, reassurance as in power. Because as long as you were reaching out, as long as you were available, as long as you showed more emotional investment, she felt safe in one simple belief: he's not going anywhere. Your silence destroys that belief. Instantly, when you go quiet, the script she was leaning on disappears. She can't use your messages to gauge how much you care. She can't rely on your presence to soothe her ego. She can't read you anymore. and unpredictability is her emotional kryptonite. Silence pulls away the comfort she never thanked you for, but always depended on. And dependence creates desire, only after it's gone. 3. Silence forces her to confront the reality she ignored. When you were always there, she had no reason to reflect, no reason to question herself, no reason to evaluate your value. But silence turns the mirror around. Suddenly, she's the one doing the overthinking. She replays past conversations. She analyzes your last message. She wonders if she said something wrong. She starts questioning her own behavior. Did she push you away? Did she underestimate you? Did she assume too much? Did she take you for granted? Women don't self-reflect when they feel confident. They self-reflect when they feel off balance. And nothing creates emotional imbalance faster than the disappearance of a man she expected to always be there. 4. Silence creates curiosity, and curiosity creates attachment. A woman's attraction doesn't grow through comfort. It grows through curiosity. Curiosity is emotional oxygen for her mind. The more she wonders, the more she feels. The more she imagines, the more she invests. And silence is the single strongest generator of curiosity you have. Why did he stop texting? Is he losing interest? Did he find someone else? Why is he so calm now? Why isn't he reacting? Her mind starts stitching together stories based on fear, desire, insecurity, ego, and longing. And the stories she tells herself are more emotionally potent than anything you could have said. This is the psychological paradox most men never understand. A woman doesn't miss what is present. She misses what is suddenly at risk. 5. Silence reframes you. From predictable to powerful. When you were always there, she had a complete emotional map of you. Your reactions, your patterns, your timing, your predictability. Predictability feels safe, but safe isn't attractive. Silence erases the map. She loses her reference points. She can't predict you anymore. She doesn't know where she stands. And in the female psyche, unpredictability equals value. For the first time, she sees you as something other than an emotional constant. She sees you as a man with boundaries, a man with a life, a man who doesn't need her attention to feel whole. You are no longer the man chasing her. You are the man she must now interpret. And interpretation is the root of feminine desire. 6. Silence isn't withdrawal, it's transformation. Your silence is not about punishing her. It's not about games. It's not about manipulation. It's about you returning to your masculine center. It's about you reclaiming emotional sovereignty. It's about you re-entering your own world instead of orbiting hers. When your silence comes from strength, not fear, women feel it instantly. They don't miss the man who disappears from insecurity. They miss the man who disappears because he finally remembered his worth. And when that happens, the dynamic flips. Quietly, powerfully, inevitably. When a woman feels your energy disappear, her reaction isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't visible from the outside. It begins quietly inside her mind. Because women don't react to silence with action. They react with analysis, with questions, with spiraling thoughts that pull her deeper and deeper into emotional tension. You think you simply stopped texting. You think you simply went quiet. But in her world, that silence opens a psychological loop she cannot close without understanding what happened. And that loop is where everything begins to shift. 1. The first phase. Rationalizing your silence. Her initial reaction is almost always denial. She tells herself, he's probably busy. He's tired. He'll text later. He's not the type to pull away. She creates excuses to protect her ego, because the idea that you might be pulling back is too uncomfortable for her to process immediately. Women don't panic at the first sign of silence. They rationalize it. But this rationalization is temporary, a thin shield covering a growing sense of uncertainty. Because deep down, she knows when a man's energy has shifted. A woman can sense emotional distance, the way you sense temperature. She feels the cold before she understands why, and that subtle hint of coldness is enough to start the spiral. 2. The second phase. Curiosity starts to build. When your silence remains steady, her mind transitions from rationalizing to questioning. Now the thoughts come faster. Why isn't he texting? Did I say something wrong? Did his feelings change? Is he losing interest? Is he talking to someone else? This is where the spiral begins. Women are emotionally forensic. They investigate. They scan. They look for clues. She rereads old messages. She examines your last conversation. She tries to detect any shift in your tone, timing, or energy. She checks when you were last online. She watches your stories. She notices what you're liking or posting. She's trying to answer one question: what changed? And the more she thinks about that question, the more she starts thinking about you. 3. The third phase. Her ego begins to crack. At some point, the curiosity becomes discomfort, and the discomfort becomes insecurity. This is where her ego stops protecting her and starts betraying her. Because now the questions turn inward. Did I push him away? Did I take him for granted? Was I too distant? Did he finally see that he could do better? Did I misjudge his interest? Did he lose respect for me? Women hate this phase, because this is where the power dynamic begins to shift. She no longer feels in control. She no longer feels superior. She no longer feels certain that she has you. Silence cracks the armor her ego was wearing. And once that crack appears, the spiral intensifies. 4. The fourth phase. Emotional pressure builds. Now your silence isn't just confusing. It's unsettling. She starts feeling the weight of your absence. Not because she suddenly loves you, but because she realizes she miscalculated your stability. The emotional pressure builds because she has no answers. You didn't argue. You didn't chase. You didn't complain. You simply stepped out of her emotional orbit. And that calm silence is more powerful than any reaction. This is where she wonders. Has he moved on? Is he replacing me? Why is he so indifferent? Why am I thinking about him this much? Your silence begins to occupy her internal world, in a way your presence never did, because silence forces her to do the emotional labor she never had to do before, and emotional labor creates attachment. 5. The fifth phase. Imagination takes over. When she can't understand you, she imagines you, and the imagination of a woman is the most potent emotional force in her psychology. She starts visualizing scenarios. You at the gym, leveling up. You laughing with someone new. You becoming focused, disciplined, distant. You realizing your worth. You upgrading your life without her. You emotionally closing the door she thought would always be open. Her mind exaggerates these images because silence removes certainty, and the brain fills uncertainty with stories. Some stories make her anxious, some make her jealous, some make her regretful, some make her angry at herself for not valuing you sooner. But they all have one thing in common. They keep her emotionally tied to you. 6. The sixth phase. Fear of loss hits. At the peak of the spiral comes the fear she would never admit. Am I losing him? Not the fear of losing a man, but the fear of losing the version of herself she was when you cared. That woman who felt desired, valued, admired, chosen. She suddenly feels that slipping, and that feeling is powerful enough to override pride, ego, and even logic. This is the moment where your silence becomes gravity. She doesn't just notice you're gone, she feels it. And that feeling, not your effort, is what makes her miss you. Silence has always been misunderstood by men. Most see it as emptiness, as a pause, as a moment where nothing is happening. But to a woman, your silence is not the absence of noise, it is the presence of power. It shifts the emotional atmosphere around her. It unsettles her predictability. It interrupts her sense of control. When you finally stop explaining, stop chasing, stop proving, something inside her recalibrates. She doesn't admit it, she doesn't show it, but she feels it immediately. A man's silence, when it comes from strength rather than insecurity, hits a woman deeper than any argument, apology, or emotional confession ever could. Because silence is the language of a man who no longer seeks approval. Your silence tells her something she wasn't prepared to hear, that your emotional world does not revolve around her anymore. When you were always available, she could map your every move. She knew your intentions, your rhythm, your emotional temperature. You were predictable. You were familiar. And familiarity makes a man easy to ignore. But the moment you withdraw your energy, everything she assumed about you dissolves. She can no longer predict what you feel, what you think, or what you plan to do next. That unpredictability activates her curiosity, and curiosity is one of the strongest psychological triggers of attraction. She begins to ask questions she never asked before. Why did he stop talking? What changed? Did I push him too far? Did someone else enter his life? Why does his silence feel heavier than his words? Women don't miss the men who talk too much. They miss the men whose silence forces them to think. Silence makes you mysterious, and mystery is emotional gravity. When a woman can't decode you, she invests more energy trying to. She replays old conversations, reinterprets your tone, examines her own behavior, and starts noticing the very things she once ignored. Your absence turns into a puzzle she wants to solve. And every time she tries to make sense of your silence, she becomes more emotionally entwined with you, not because you're reaching out, but because her mind won't let her leave the space you've created. Silence also feels powerful because it removes emotional control from her hands. She can ignore your text, delay her replies, test your patience, and maintain the illusion that she's the one directing the pace of the connection. But she cannot control what happens when you simply stop feeding the dynamic. Silence is the one position she cannot manipulate. She can provoke a reaction from a man who is insecure. She can push buttons on a man who is emotional, but a man who sits in silence, grounded, unfazed, that man cannot be moved. And that immovability forces her to confront her own emotions without the comfort of your reassurance soothing them. Another reason your silence feels powerful is because it signals emotional independence. A woman feels it immediately when a man no longer needs her validation to feel stable. Most men can't sit quietly with themselves. They collapse into anxiety, fear, or overthinking. But the man who can detach, breathe, focus, and redirect his energy inward becomes a rare presence. He radiates peace instead of neediness. He expands instead of shrinking. And women feel that expansion even when you say nothing. It makes her question whether she misjudged your strength, whether she underestimated you, whether she assumed you would always be available. Silence becomes more powerful than words because it communicates self-control. Any man can talk, any man can chase, any man can beg for attention when things feel uncertain. But the man who chooses silence shows discipline, and discipline is the foundation of respect. She may not show it, but she respects the man who doesn't break frame. She respects the man who doesn't respond emotionally to her pullback. She respects the man who doesn't treat her inconsistency as a command. Silence says, "I lead myself." And a woman will always follow the man who leads himself. But here's the deepest truth. Your silence doesn't just change how she sees you, it changes how she sees herself. When you go silent, she becomes aware of the emotional entitlement she had, how she took your effort for granted, how she assumed your attention would always be there. Your silence creates contrast, and contrast creates clarity. She suddenly notices how easy things felt when you were present, compared to how empty they feel now that you're gone. That absence becomes a mirror, reflecting the value you brought into her world, value she didn't acknowledge until it vanished. In the end, your silence is not a weapon. It's not manipulation. It's not punishment. It is a declaration of self-respect. It is the moment you stop chasing validation and start reclaiming your center. And whether she admits it or not, that shift is the exact reason she begins to miss you, not because you withdrew, but because you finally stood still. When your silence holds steady, something fascinating happens inside her. Women don't respond to silence all at once. They move through emotional stages, each one peeling back a deeper layer of truth she has been hiding from herself. A man often thinks nothing is happening because she doesn't call, doesn't text, doesn't react. But inside her mind, your silence is stirring a series of emotional shifts she cannot stop, and each stage draws her closer to you without you doing a single thing. It begins with the disruption of comfort. She had grown used to your presence, your messages, your attention, your reliability. Even if she acted distant or indifferent, she knew exactly where you stood. Your consistency was her emotional cushion. She may not have valued it, but she depended on it. And then you stopped. The familiar rhythm vanished. That comfort dissolved. For the first time, she feels a subtle discomfort she tries to ignore, but it lingers like a shadow behind every thought. Your silence plants the first seed. Then comes the ego. Her pride begins its defense. She tells herself she's not affected, that she doesn't care, that you're probably busy or distracted. She may post something online to appear unbothered. She may talk to someone else to prove to herself that she still has options. But ego is loud because it's fragile. It's the mask she hides behind, not the truth she feels. No matter how confidently she pretends, she knows something has shifted, and her ego cannot soothe it. As your silence continues, curiosity takes over. This is where things start to change. She begins to notice the absence more clearly. Something feels off, and her mind starts scanning for answers. She rereads old messages. She replays conversations. She tries to study the last moment you interacted, wondering if she missed something. Curiosity is dangerous because it pulls her into your gravitational field. She begins thinking about you more often, analyzing you, questioning you, even if she pretends not to care. And then the introspection begins. She stops looking at you for answers and starts looking at herself. This is the stage she never wants to reach because it forces her to confront her own behavior. She remembers the times she brushed you off, the times she replied late, the times she acted cold. She wonders if she pushed you too far or misjudged your intention. For the first time, she feels the weight of her actions. Silence becomes her mirror, showing her the things she refused to see when you were still present. But the most intense stage is the fear of loss. Your silence no longer feels like mood or coincidence. It feels like drifting. It feels like you might actually be moving on. She wonders if another woman has your attention, if someone else is making you feel appreciated. If you finally reached the point she never believed you would, the point where you stop prioritizing her. Women don't fear losing the men they control. They fear losing the men who choose themselves. And your silence tells her you've chosen yourself. Once fear takes hold, emotional reconnection begins. She starts testing the waters in small, subtle ways. A reaction to your story, a random message, a light comment. Maybe even something completely meaningless, sent only to see if you're still warm toward her or if the distance is real. These small signals are not accidents. They are emotional fishing lines. She's trying to reconnect without admitting she wants to. Because your silence has stirred something deeper than she intended. She wants your attention again. And if your silence remains grounded not as punishment but as self-respect, she enters the final stage, re-evaluation. This is where everything flips. She begins to see you differently, calmer, stronger, harder to read, harder to reach. A man who is not reacting is a man she must adjust to, a man she must step toward, a man she must work to understand. Respect begins to replace assumption. Attraction replaces entitlement. And longing replaces indifference. She doesn't miss your words. She misses the certainty your presence provided. She realizes that your energy was not something she could take for granted. She begins to understand the value of the stability you once offered effortlessly, and it's only now, in silence, that she sees the truth she ignored. You mattered more than she admitted. Your silence didn't just shift the dynamic. It revealed her. It revealed how much she relied on your consistency. It revealed how much she assumed you'd stay. It revealed how deeply she feels when you're no longer in her world the way you used to be. And in that revelation, emotional gravity pulls her back toward you, not because you pushed, but because you stepped away, and she felt the emptiness. Silence is not the absence of love. Silence is the presence of truth. And in that truth, she begins to see you not as the man who needed her approval, but as the man who finally remembered his worth. A woman's imagination is the most powerful force in her emotional universe, more powerful than your presence, more powerful than your words, and far more powerful than your effort. A man speaks to her mind, but silence? Silence speaks to her instincts, and instincts always overpower logic. This is why silence becomes the greatest tool a man has, not to manipulate her, not to punish her, but to let her feel what she could never feel when you were always available. Because when your voice fades, her imagination wakes up, and she will create images, stories, and possibilities that are far more intense than anything you could have said out loud. At first, her imagination tries to protect her ego. She tells herself you're busy, you're tired, you're preoccupied. She assumes your attention is still rooted in her world, just temporarily paused. This is the ego preservation phase, the moment where her mind tries to control the narrative to avoid discomfort. But the human mind cannot sit in uncertainty for long. Silence is not neutral. Silence is pressure, and pressure demands release. The longer you stay silent, the faster her imagination begins stretching into new space. She starts imagining things she didn't think she was capable of feeling. She imagines you becoming more focused, more disciplined, more self-contained, more attractive. Not because you're doing anything, but because silence removes the limits of what she thinks you're capable of. You stop being predictable. You stop being safe. You stop being the man whose energy she could always count on. And the man who cannot be predicted is the man who cannot be controlled. This is the first crack in her emotional certainty. Soon, her imagination shifts from reasons to possibilities. What if he's actually moving on? What if he's finally done with me? What if someone else has his attention? And this right here is where your silence becomes psychological gravity. Her mind starts filling the empty space with versions of you she never saw before. More confident, more desirable, more admired. The version of you she thought she had figured out begins to dissolve. Now you're not a man who chased her, you're a man who walked away. And men who walk away become obsessions. What makes this so powerful is simple psychology. The human brain reacts emotionally to imagined scenarios as if they were real. She doesn't need proof that you're leveling up. Her imagination does the work for you. She doesn't need to see you with another woman. The image is enough to trigger instinct. She doesn't need to know you're doing better. She feels it, because silence amplifies possibility. This is why silence hits harder than anything you could ever say. Words explain. Imagination exaggerates. And exaggeration is what creates desire, fear, longing, and emotional pull. Her imagination begins expanding into competitive territory. She starts picturing other women noticing you at the gym, at work, on social media, even in places that may not exist. She imagines you being admired. She imagines you being chosen. She imagines other women appreciating parts of you she ignored. And even if none of this is happening, the emotional impact is still real, because the mind treats imagined loss like actual loss. Then comes the regret phase. She begins revisiting moments she brushed off, times you were kind, times you were present, times you were patient. She recalls the security your energy brought her. She remembers how effortless it felt when you were always there. And now she imagines life without that anchor, and it frightens her more than she admits. You didn't disappear. You simply stopped giving her the comfort she abused. And comfort, once removed, becomes craving. As her imagination grows more vivid, she starts adjusting her behavior. She checks your online activity. She scans your stories. She wonders who you're with. She reads into your silence like scripture. She creates narratives about your movement, your growth, your momentum. And the more she can't confirm, the more she imagines. That's the paradox. The less you say, the more she feels. The less you reveal, the more she invents. The less you show, the more she obsesses. This is the hidden advantage. Silence gives men the advantage most men never experience, because they never give a woman enough space to imagine them. They fill her mind with messages, reassurance, explanations, pictures, calls, attention. And in doing so, they collapse the mystery her imagination needs to grow emotional attachment. When you stay silent with strength, not anger, not passive aggression, not manipulation, you allow her imagination to expand into fear, curiosity, desire, and uncertainty. And those four emotions create something no effort, no message, and no gift ever could. The feeling of losing you, because women don't miss the man who is always present. They miss the man whose silence makes them wonder, question, regret, and hope. They miss the man who lives a life they're no longer sure they belong in. Your silence didn't push her away. Her imagination pulled her back. There is a moment always quiet, always unexpected, when something inside her shifts. Not because you messaged, not because you reached out, not because you suddenly did something impressive, but because the silence finally settles, and she sees the truth she refused to see before. This is the moment every man who walks away eventually reaches. The moment she realizes your value, not when you were giving, but when you stopped. It begins subtly. She wakes up and checks her phone without thinking. No message from you. That tiny pause she feels? That's not curiosity. That's the beginning of recognition. Recognition that the presence she ignored is gone. She goes about her day, pretending she's unbothered, but your silence has already planted a small fracture in her emotional certainty. She used to feel so sure about you, so confident you were there, waiting, available, predictable. But now, she doesn't know. Now, you're no longer a guarantee. Now, she feels something she never felt around you before. Doubt. That doubt matures into discomfort. That discomfort matures into realization. And realization, that's where everything cracks open. She begins revisiting old conversations, not because she wants closure, but because she's searching for proof that she didn't misjudge you. She reads your last messages more carefully. She pays attention to your tone, your calmness, your kindness. She sees now what she was blind to then. You weren't desperate. You weren't clingy. You weren't weak, you were consistent. And consistency is only seen as weakness by people who aren't ready for it. The deeper the silence stretches, the more she begins to reinterpret her own behavior. This is a psychological shift most men never witness because they never stay silent long enough to let her reach it. Suddenly, she remembers the small things you did, the check-ins, the effort, the presence she once brushed off. They hit differently now, not as obligations, but as gifts. Before, your energy felt normal. Now, it feels rare. Scarcity creates value always, and the moment your energy becomes scarce, she begins valuing it in reverse. This is also when fear begins to seep in, not fear of losing love. That comes later. This is fear of losing access. Access to your presence, access to your certainty, access to the emotional stability you always brought into her world without her earning it. Regardless of how confident she appears, every woman feels this moment. Even the emotionally detached ones, even the prideful ones, even the ones who claimed they didn't care, because silence reveals the truth. You were contributing more to the connection than she ever admitted, and now, without your presence, she feels the imbalance. The energy she once took for granted is no longer hers to depend on. She starts imagining you moving forward. She starts imagining you growing. She starts imagining you being appreciated by someone else. And this right here is the deepest emotional trigger. Comparison. Not comparison of you to other men, but comparison of herself to other women. She wonders if someone else is appreciating you. She wonders if someone else is benefiting from the version of you she overlooked. She wonders if she misplayed her entire hand. And because she cannot confirm the answers, her mind intensifies the possibilities. This is the moment where guilt and admiration collide. Guilt for losing what she didn't understand. Admiration for the strength you showed by walking away. This is when she finally sees you correctly, not as the man who pursued, but as the man who could have chosen her and didn't. That realization cuts deeper than any argument, explanation, or emotional plea ever could. She doesn't miss your messages. She misses the version of herself she was when you cared. She misses the emotional safety your presence created. And, most importantly, she misses the man she never thought she could lose. Your silence didn't destroy her perception of you. It corrected it. Every man thinks silence is something he uses. But the men who truly rise, the ones who become unforgettable, unshakable, untouchable, eventually learn the deeper truth. Silence isn't a tactic. Silence is transformation. Silence is rebirth. Because when your world becomes quiet, when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, when you stop bleeding your energy into someone who doesn't value it, something inside you changes. Not gradually, not politely, but profoundly. Silence becomes the forge where the weaker version of you dies, and the stronger version of you is born. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. You can feel the space she used to occupy. You feel the absence of the validation you once relied on. Your mind wants to reach out, to fix, to explain, to chase after clarity. But as the days pass, something shifts. You begin noticing the peace hidden behind the discomfort. You begin feeling the strength hidden behind restraint. You begin understanding that the version of you who once needed her no longer exists, because silence forces you inward, and inward is where men find their power. You start rebuilding without even realizing it. Your presence deepens, your thoughts sharpen, your emotional reactions stabilize. The noise inside your mind fades. You walk differently. You breathe differently. You carry yourself differently. This is the moment your silence transforms from absence to authority. You become the man who no longer needs the room to validate him. He validates himself. You become the man who no longer rushes to respond. He chooses when and how he speaks. You become the man who no longer explains his worth. He embodies it. And this is the moment she feels the shift more than ever. Because silence not only changes how you see yourself, it changes how she sees you. Before, she saw the man who wanted her. Now, she sees the man she has to earn. Before, she saw the man who was always available. Now, she sees the man who lives in his purpose. Before, she saw the man who reacted emotionally. Now, she sees the man who responds only to what aligns with his values. Your silence didn't just distance you from her. It distanced you from your old identity. You become stoic, not because you forced yourself to be, but because silence made you confront the only person you were avoiding, yourself. You realize how much energy you wasted trying to force connection. You realize how much peace you sacrificed for temporary attention. You realize how much of your worth you outsourced to her reactions. In silence, all of these truths come to the surface. Men don't rise when they get the woman back. Men rise when the silence shows them they never needed her to begin with. And ironically, that is when she feels the deepest pull, not because she sees you as a possession, but because she finally feels the strength she ignored. Women are not drawn to men who disappear emotionally. They're drawn to men who disappear to rebuild. And that's exactly what silence forces you to do. Your silence becomes your discipline. Your silence becomes your control. Your silence becomes your masculine purpose. Because when you stop chasing her, you start chasing your life. Your fitness improves. Your focus sharpens. Your boundaries solidify. Your mission becomes clearer. Your standards rise. And suddenly, she is no longer the center of your world. Your future is. This is why silence is not a weapon. Silence is a mirror. Silence shows her the truth of the dynamic. But more importantly, silence shows you the truth of your own potential. You didn't lose her in the silence. You found yourself. You didn't push her away. You stepped back into alignment. You didn't cut her off. You cut off the version of you that was willing to diminish his value to be seen. This is why silence hits her so deeply. Not because you're punishing her, but because you're evolving into the man she didn't believe you could become. A man who stands tall. A man who chooses himself. A man who speaks without speaking. By the time she realizes you transformed, you're already walking forward. And whether she follows or fades, you no longer break, because the man who has mastered silence has mastered himself. There's a moment in every man's journey where he finally understands something life-changing. It was never her silence you needed to decode. It was your own. Because when you stop talking, when you stop proving, when you stop begging to be understood, you begin to hear yourself. You begin to feel the weight of your own presence. You begin to recognize the strength that was buried beneath all the noise. You begin to reclaim the man you were always meant to be. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is clarity. Silence is direction. Silence is rebirth. And the man you are right now, the one who's learning, watching, evolving, he is not the same man she walked away from. He is stronger. He is calmer. He is sharper. He is no longer moved by temporary attention. He is moved only by purpose. Remember this. A man who needs validation speaks. A man who owns his value stays silent. And a man who masters silence is the man she can never replace. If these words hit you in the chest, if you feel something shifting inside you, if you know you're done living small, done chasing, done giving discount versions of yourself, then it's time to step into the version of you that commands respect without raising his voice. Time to join the brotherhood of men who have chosen discipline over desperation, purpose over chaos, and strength over approval. If you're ready to rise, truly rise, click the link below. Not tomorrow. Not when things settle. Right now. Because your future doesn't wait. Your purpose doesn't wait. And the man you're becoming is already calling your name. Enroll once. Grow forever. You don't chase anymore. From here on, you choose.